Davos has washed up on the shore of a small island in Blackwater Bay. He remembers swimming beneath the chain boom and then getting caught by the current and gulping seawater. But somehow he is alive, and he believes the seven have still have some use for him. Despairing over the loss of four of his sons in the sea battle, he contemplates dying on the island, but decides instead to live. A Lyseni ship rescues him of Salladhor Saan's fleet. So this chapter is incredibly short, so we'll dive into it as much as we can. But I would say sort of the first big takeaway from this is that this is honestly one of the only chapters that I could find, and I've been looking on like forums and stuff like that to see what other people say about it, and I found this one. This is from the Song of Ice and Fire reread subreddit, and this comment was left, and I honestly kind of thought this myself too. It says this chapter is interesting as it's the only time we actually see the seven actually do something. Compared to R'hllor, for example, it's nice that the seven get some validity points here for once. You know, Mother, have mercy. Davos prayed, save me, gentle mother, save us all. My luck is gone, and my sons. You know, he was weeping freely now, salt tears streaming down his cheeks. The fire took it all. The fire, which is really interesting. And I think that's a big parallel, because this is where you also start to get like a huge split between Davos and Stannis, and Davos is going to kind of start to go in his direction.
Right.
And here Davos is cursing the fire, which Stannis is going more towards. And we still don't know the way it's going to play out in Winds of Winter. Assume it's probably going to be somewhat similar to the way it plays out in the show.
Yeah.
Where, Stannis actually gets too close to the fire and, kills his daughter and then ends up losing anyway. So it is kind of interesting here that Davos is turning to the seven and cursing the fire.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on in this chapter. It is a short chapter. It's very much like, where's Davos now? Where are we going to propel him? What's his new motivation, which we know is to kill Melisandre. But there's a lot to go on in this chapter. And the first thing is the survivor's guilt that he feels. He feels like, what is a father who outlives their sons? Like, why wouldn't he be able to protect them now they're dead? And he has a really tough time with that by also being stuck on an island, being dehydrated, fighting, getting crabs, trying to kill birds and eat them. I mean,
yeah, if you've ever seen the movie Castaway,
I would say it's Castaway.
It's totally Castaway. Yeah,
Castaway 100%. And
which is, I'm wondering if I have to, George wrote this, sort of, I mean, Castaway was like mid 90s, late 90s or early 2000s, one of those things. So certainly in that time, frame. Yeah.
And George loves film and TV and has written for it. I'm sure that he took a little bit of inspiration from Castaway for this chapter. And it's a sad chapter, because Davos did outlive his sons, and he's trying to deal with the survivor's guilt of this and thinking back on the battle and exactly how everything went down. And the one thing that he immediately notes is, and he curses, is wildfire and pyromancer's piss, as he calls it, which is my new favorite term for wildfire. I will only be referring to it as pyromancer's piss from now on. So thank you, Davos, for that. But yeah, there's a religious experience on this island, and it's kind of up to to the reader to decide what of that is perspective and what of that is reality. And it's a good question. And also the fact that the seven were toppled down. So like, would they answer from Davos? And is he only feeling like the seven helped him out because he does feel like he is going to be standing up against this priestess of R'hllor and of the fire? So there's a lot to go on here. Did you notice that he never once blames Stannis?
Yeah.
He mentions what Stannis has done, but it's always Melisandre. And it is clear as day for me. This is my opinion, that Davos's arc has to result in him having to face the fact that Stannis has been able, like, he's the one making these terrible decisions the whole time. I'm not saying Melisandre is innocent, but I'm saying that he will eventually see Stannis burn Shireen, and then that will be where he finally has to put the blame solely on Stannis. He is doing everything other than blaming Stannis, and now he is setting off to kill Melisandre.
Yeah, I mean, this line right here, he's like, you called the fire, you burned us, right? And he is blaming her. It is, interesting to think about, because, if you go to the show, like, obviously he does have the run-in with Melisandre, where when he comes back and sort of, but when he sort of realizes what happens.
Yeah.
It's sort of explained to him. He's not there for it. He could be there for it, for Stannis burning Shireen.
Yeah, it's all going to depend on when he comes back with Rickon, right?
Right.
But do you feel like it's trending that way, to where Davos keeps blinding himself to Stannis's poor decisions and eventually has to face it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's gonna have to come a little more to the forefront,
yeah,
of it, and to see that it's really Stannis's problem more so than Melisandre's.
Yeah,
because the other thing that's kind of weird about the timing is, like, if Melisandre is the one to resurrect Jon Snow, how does that Davos Melisandre conflict resolve itself?
Yeah, I don't see Davos actually killing Melisandre in the books. I don't think it will happen. I think, like most of our characters who set out on a quest or a mission, it's going to get messed up. Almost no one is going to end up doing what they've set out to do, and he's clearly setting out to kill Melisandre. I think also there's some really good symbolism in him losing his fingers. So I lost my sons and I lost my luck. And in a way, I think him losing his fingers is the beginning of him maybe losing his allegiance to the man who gave him his fingers, which is Stannis. So yeah,
I will say this chapter is this in combination with the last chapter that Davos is in, which is I think it's probably like Davos 4, because he doesn't have that many chapters in A Clash of Kings. I think it is Davos 4, but I could be wrong. Maybe it's like 7 or something. Regardless, though, the idea that Azor Ahai may not end up being like maybe it is like something like it is in the show, where in theory it's Jon that's Azor Ahai, right?
Yeah.
And it's like more like he's the one who brings people together to take on the Night King, White Walkers, whatever, as opposed to actually like Jon's got like a flaming sword going one-on-one. But one of the whole, some of the language around it is a lot of people look to this chapter for the possibility of Davos. If you sort to look at it, because there's a lot of salt water mentioned in this chapter over and over again, and he's sort of reborn, right? Like on this island, now in the Faith of the Seven, if you want, or whatever, but you look at it, when the red star bleeds and the darkness gathers, Azor Ahai shall be born again amidst salt, smoke, and salt. When he opens his mouth to scream, the water came rushing in, tasting of salt, and Davos knew that he was drowning.
Okay,
so,
but
I mean,
listen, we're talking about Lord, we're talking about the Seven. Let's show some piety and some respect for the Drown God. Like, are we considering that maybe the Drown God is the one that burped Davos up?
Could be.
Depends on if you believe in divine intervention, I suppose.
Yeah, so it's definitely, it's interesting that this is one, that does. Like we said, this chapter's kind of short. I think one other thing I want to pull out from out here. There's actually a few points I want to pull out here, but I think sort of just a bigger takeaway, and then I can pull up some specifics. Is Davos loses sons?
Yeah,
here. Yeah, that's like the show does hint. The show, I think he does have a son.
Yeah, I think he has at least one.
I think he does have one son who does die in the Battle of the Blackwater, but it's never really brought up again or anything. But here he loses almost everything.
Yeah, he has a few sons left. He obviously has his wife. But yeah, he loses, I believe, 4 sons here in this chapter. And it obviously is affecting him greatly. I like that George also takes time to kind of go over that. He didn't glance over it. Davos, this chapter almost feels like a fever dream at some points. And I think he's trying to process that while also trying to stay alive. And he's asking himself constantly, why should he live? When Allard, Merrick, Mathos, and perhaps Devon as well, and Dale, good old Dale. Dale does not seem like a Westeros name, by the way.
I know.
George, come on. But yeah, they all passed away. And he's trying to deal with all of this. Survivor's Guild, loss of his children. I mean, this is rough. Rough stuff for our boy Davos. And I guess the only thing that could get him off that island was the fact that, one, he remained loyal to Stannis, by the way. He said, I serve King Stannis, which I think is telltale of his stubbornness, which may be a good or bad thing, but also the fact that he wants to kill Melisandre. Vengeance it is for our man.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff in here also about there's a lot of stuff in here about gods, like not just but just a lot of lines and some other sort of lines that I think are kind of cool to pull up, right? So it's talking about the little cave he's in, saying, you know, his cave was all the shelter he had, and that was a little enough. Driftwood and bits of charred debris would wash up and on the strand during low tide, but he had no way to strike or a spark or start a fire. Once in desperation, he had tried rubbing two pieces of driftwood against each other, but the wood was rotted and his efforts earned him only blisters. His clothes were sodden as well, as he had lost one of his boots somewhere in the bay before he washed up here. Thirst, hunger, exposure, they were his companions, which I think is, you know, sort of like describes the entire chapter. Which again is really small. But so then, you know, he's talking about it's too far to swim. He's weak, but it didn't matter. Davos had always been a sailor. He was meant to die at sea. The gods beneath the waters have been waiting for me, he told himself. It's past time I went to them. And then ends up, you know, seeing some other things, you know, he talks of a Merlin king, right? You know, that could be down there. So he does kind of talk about some of these sea gods, which is certainly interesting. And then also it's kind of, I kind of just, it's not like something that I think is like maybe George was hinting at just the way he wrote this chapter, but it's like, oh, that is kind of a cool parallel, is just if you go back, it's like he's trying to strike a fire, but he can't do it. And you sort of think of like Stannis and fire. And now he's looking towards the seven, and it's like the seven that ultimately he prays to the mother, if you look at it that way, or perhaps like the sea gods, right? It's something, I guess, obviously, almost anything other than fire.
Yeah, fire is not there to help him in his time of need. And there's a ton of symbolism here. And I do think that this is written to be a religious experience for Davos. And I also think we're supposed to kind of question it a little bit based on what he pulls out of this. Like, I don't know if the seven would necessarily want him to go kill someone. But hey, gods work in mysterious ways, they say. So
yeah, I'll pull up the part here towards the end, right? It was her work, Davos said again, more weakly, her work and yours, Onion Knight. You rode her into Storm's End in the black of night, so she might lose her shadow child. You are not guiltless. No, you rode beneath her banner and flew it from your mast. You watched the seven burn at Dragonstone and did nothing. She gave the father justice to the fire and the mother's mercy, and the wisdom of the crone, smith, and stranger, maid, and warrior. She burnt them all to the glory of her cruel god, and you stood and held your tongue. Even when she killed old Maester Crescent, even then you did nothing. And then the sail was 100 yards away.
Yeah, and if you actually think about Davos too, Davos has maybe seen some of the most messed up things that happen in Westeros in like over 100 years, considering the fact that he, one, got hit by the Pyromancer's piss, which is wildfire, and he also watched a demon shadow baby be born out of Melisandre. Like, he has actually seen proof of heinous things. So it's actually not that surprising that he would then say, well, why not pray to the seven? Why not have some belief in something else? Because if that other thing is real, I don't want to be a part of that, because it obviously is devious. So Davos is the person probably has the most reason to believe in any of the religions.
He probably does. And if you continue on here, this is where, like, as you were saying earlier, so like the galley might be Joffrey's. He realized suddenly when Salladhor Saan's approaching him, and he's like, oh, he doesn't know what king he should say, right? But he notices that the ship is Lyseni. She was Salladhor Saan's. The mother sent her here, the mother in her mercy. She had a task for him. Stannis lives. He knew that then. I have a king still and sons. I have other sons and a wife, a loyal and loving. How could he have forgotten? The mother was merciful indeed. Stannis, he shouted back at the Lyseni, gods be good. I serve King Stannis. Yeah, it's almost like he's kind of delusional, man.
I mean, he's willing to blame himself. He said, you're not guiltless, Onion Knight. Like, he will blame everyone but Stannis in this chapter. It's crazy.
I know, it's kind of heartbreaking to see.
It's really hard. Yeah, he is very blind, and I think that you know, he feels like he owes a debt. You know, he was a onion knight. He was basically a pirate, right? That got raised up into knight status, and everyone looked down on him. He also, by the way, he says maybe this rock will be my tombstone, and they'll call it the Onion Rock, which I thought was kind of funny. I want an onion rock for my desk.
All right. Well, you know, that might be it. Like I said, we said it's one of these chapters where sometimes they're just like a page.
Yeah, but some good stuff there. You know, it doesn't have everything. It doesn't have all the theories, but certainly a lot of Westeros or Plantos lore in there with all the different gods, and then Davos being a castaway fanfic is pretty interesting. So let us know either down in the comments on YouTube or send us an email at btkcast@gmail.com and let us know what you think of Davos in the beginning of his arc for Storm of Swords. And do you think Davos had a real religious experience, or is he delusional?
Yeah, I think he's delusional.
I think he's delusional. Yeah.
Yeah, especially, you know, I would be, I need to, a cool thing to do actually might be, we should just pay attention to some as we progress further and we get to some more of these other Davos chapters like this. I think this is probably one of those chapters that when you're reading it, like we're reading it, where it's kind of like in succession, you're like, okay, this one isn't important. But when you look at it in sort of the whole Davos arc, might be really important, especially the idea of Azor Ahai and some of the deal with the gods, because here he is praying to the Seven, saying, you know, I've forsaken the Seven, but then the Seven are the ones to come and get him. But then he's also praying to the Get Down God, and then he's cursing R'hllor. But who knows? Maybe R'hllor is the one that ultimately saves him, because it's King Stannis, a King Stannis, like, you know, loyal person is ultimately the one that comes to his aid.
Yeah, and also the fact that Davos seems to always be at the right place at the right time to see these crazy things happening, and then he has this kind of own personal miracle. But if he is going to get Rickon on Skagos, he might be one of the first people in many, many millennia to see unicorns.
It's true.
I always got to bring up the unicorns on Skagos.
Oh, absolutely.
Every time.
Yeah.